Welcome back. We're spotlighting the firestorm surrounding music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. In the wake of more than 100 new sex assault allegations, we're wondering how dangerous really is Diddy? Now, he's been denied bail twice, we know, by two different judges. This week, his legal team, by the way, submitted a notice of appeal to the U.S. District Court trying to reverse those rulings and get him out. He's being held in federal jail, the Brooklyn Metropolitan Detention Center, and he maintains his innocence. Now, before we start talking about his upcoming federal case, let's look back a little bit at the turbulent times of Sean Diddy Combs.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you gotta do that. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now.
As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers. Agents seized evidence of the crimes charged in this indictment. They seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 defaced AR-15s and a large capacity drum magazine. They also seized evidence of the freak-offs, electronic devices that contain images and videos of the freak-offs with multiple victims. And they seized cases and cases of the kinds of personal lubricant and baby oil that Combs' staff allegedly used to stock hotel rooms for the freak-offs, more than 1,000 bottles altogether.
There's nothing that the government said in their presentation today that changes anyone's mind about anything. He's been looking forward to this day. He's been looking forward to clearing his name, and he's going to clear his name. And we're going to stand by his side as he does. We believe in him wholeheartedly.
Our youngest victim at the time of the occurrence was 9 years old. We have an individual who was 14 years old. We have one who was 15. 25 of the 120 individuals who are plaintiffs in these cases were minors at the time of the acts complained of.
He believes he's innocent. I believe he's innocent. And we're going to fight this case with all of our might until we don't have to fight anymore.
We have a very special guest we want to welcome in now. He's a retired NYPD detective, widely known as the hip-hop cop, Derek Parker. Derek, good morning to you. Thanks for coming on Opening Statements.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. Let's take a trip back to the 90s together, please. Back in the 90s, set the scene for us. I understand that you were tapped to start up the NYPD's rap intelligence unit.
Yes, I was given that task to create this unit to deal with the violence in the hip-hop community and to provide a better understanding of what went on for the police commissioner and the chief of department.
So then how did you get in contact with Diddy for the first time? What was the first time you two crossed paths?
Well, I've been watching Diddy for a while, back in the 90s, and one of the bigger events that I had was the shooting at Club New York involving himself with J-Lo and Shine. I was tasked to go there. I got a phone call in the middle of the night to get up and go to the city because this happened. And when I went to the precinct that night, it was very chaotic because all the lawyers were outside and they were all applauding me, saying somebody with brains has finally showed up. We want to see our client. It was really, really a chaotic scene. So basically what happened was that there was a shooting inside the club where Diddy, I call him Puff back then, was in the car with J-Lo and Wolf, his bodyguard. They took off and left, and Shine, who was with them, apparently came out with a gun in his hand, and the police arrested him on the spot. And then what happened was that while they were in the precinct, they brought J-Lo and Diddy back with Wolf to the Midtown North precinct. And when they brought them back, I spoke with them very briefly, and then we transported them back to Midtown South. That was where the precinct of occurrence was. And then the DA came in, and then he handled the case from there. And then they did the interviews, and then we went from there and handled that case.
Did you agree with how that case wound up proceeding against Shine?
Well, I have to say that, Shine was caught with a gun that night. So it happened with him. I can't say he's totally innocent, but, it went the way it went. I mean, it was very difficult because there were conflicting statements from witnesses that said what Diddy did. One person said he had a gun. Some people said he didn't have a gun. It was just a lot of things going on back then. The DA had a very tough time to prosecute that case.
I was going to ask you about that, Detective. Weren't there two guns, according to some accounts, that Shine had one and Diddy had the other?
Well, the other gun you're talking about was probably found in the car that they were traveling in. That was the second gun that was that had been found that night. So the police had recovered two guns. You're correct in that.
Gotcha. And so, Detective Derek, so that was the first time you crossed paths, and then along the way, I understand you had more and more interaction with him, more arrests, so many so that you started getting the nickname Diddy's Detective. Tell us kind of how that happened, please.
Well, what happened was that, I've been following Diddy for a while. I mean, the East Coast, West Coast war was in the early 90s when that happened, out there with Bad Boy Records and then Death Row Records with Suge Knight. So, I mean, I traveled to Los Angeles and to Las Vegas back then, but I followed Diddy. I followed his career, and every time he got into trouble, I would get called by the chief or the chief of detectives or the PC. The police commissioner would call me as well when he wanted information about what went on with this individual. So he had the Steve Stout assault at MTV with the MTV thing, so I had dealt with that. But it was a lot of things that people started nicknaming me Diddy's cop, because every time he got into trouble, I was there. I had to be there to give the brass and the department an update on what was going on with him and why these things were happening with him.
Mm-hmm. Detective, tell me, when Tupac was shot at the recording studio in New York, and at the same time he was shot, we know Diddy's in the building, were you called in to investigate that?
I was on the phone with the detective that was responding to that scene, and I told him it was going to be very difficult for him to really get a handle on what was going on, because, people had called me and told me what was going on with that shooting at the Tupac studio. So I knew it was going to be very difficult to get Tupac to cooperate and to say who shot him. And there was always some banter that he may have shot himself when he pulled his gun out as he was being robbed. Mm-hmm. And that was always the case back then.
I think he did, right? I think that was documented, that he did accidentally shoot himself in addition to being shot by someone else.
That is
right,
correct.
right. Thank you for that, Detective. And so then, here we go. Things progressed, right? The rap wars, as you know, the East Coast, West Coast rivalry, and then Tupac is killed. Were you consulted on that? I'm so curious if you were consulted as to what you may have known about Diddy at the time.
Well, I went out when Tupac was killed, I had told my superiors here in New York that we were going to have a problem with this. And I keep remembering this same line. My inspector said, Derek, listen, they don't kill people in rock and roll. Why are you involved in this? And I said, well, this is going to be a big deal, because I was in the cold case squad. I was doing unsolved homicides for a long time. And my captain didn't really want me to be pulled over into this rap intelligence thing, but it just happened. And then when Biggie Smalls got killed, that was the biggest problem that we had in New York, because I had to formulate a plan for his burial and for the funeral, and for all the threats that were being given out to Diddy, to Little Kim, to several people involved in his entourage at this funeral. And that's when we had a big problem in New York, where we had to come up with an attack plan to make sure that everybody came here that was safe and that we had any problems, and Diddy wasn't really assassinated by some people that wanted to get at him.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you offered that, Detective. Thank you. That was going to be the next thing I was going to ask, your involvement when Biggie was killed. In your detective work, in particular, following Diddy, keeping tabs on him, knowing what's going on, investigating some of these incidents you mentioned, did you ever come across any information tying him to either the murder of Tupac Shakur or the murder of Biggie Smalls?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. The murder of Tupac Shakur was done by some individuals that were out in LA. It's an LA-based informational about the people that were involved. Diddy, yes. Diddy had some beefs with Tupac back then, but to say that he was directly involved in that right now, that's too premature to say that. There's been a lot of talk about, this payment for assassination against Tupac that maybe Diddy provided, but that's really inconclusive right now. We have to see how that really forms out. As far as the Biggie case is concerned, the individuals that were involved in that, one of the individuals is dead, from what I know. And in the Tupac case, 3 of the individuals are dead, and there's only one person that's still alive, and that's KPD, and he's going to be going on trial next year sometime for the murder of Tupac.
Right, Detective. And as you said, a big question is whether or not information may come in about any alleged payment, allegedly for $1 million for the deaths of Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. Was that statement made by Diddy is a big question here. I'm wondering if we're going to get some answers. Detective Derek Parker, I have so many more questions for you. You have lived a fascinating life. You've written a book about some of your casework. Take a look at this. I got it up on the screen. Notorious C.O.P. Inside the story of the Tupac, Biggie, and Jam Master Jay investigations from the NYPD's first hip-hop cop, Derek Parker, with Matt Deal. I can't wait to read your book, and I'd love to have you come back on the program. As you know, this investigation is quite voluminous, and we have the trial of KPD coming up as well very soon, and there could be somewhat of an intersection, as you know, Detective, with cases. Thank you kindly, Derek Parker. I'm going to read your book soon. Come back again on the show, please.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.